this could be. All right, so we're going to go through kind of a few different core topics, and as I suggested, this is just going to be a kind of extreme subset of what could be covered. We've tried to pick things that we think are very important and high impact. So one is recourse and accountability. So I already shared this example earlier of the system that's determining poor people's healthcare benefits, having a bug. And something that was kind of terrible about this is nobody took responsibility, even once the bug was found. So the creator of the algorithm was interviewed and asked, they asked him, should people be able to get an explanation for why their benefits have been cut? And he gave this very callous answer of, yeah, they probably should, but I should probably dust under my bed, like who's going to do that, which is very callous. And then he ended up blaming the policymakers for how they had rolled out the algorithm. The policymakers, could blame the software engineers that implemented it. And so there was a lot of passing the buck here. Dana Boyd has said that, it's always been a challenge for bureaucracy to assign responsibility, or bureaucracy is used to evade responsibility. And today's algorithmic systems are often extending bureaucracy.
A couple of questions and comments about cultural context.
Yeah.
Nalini notes that there didn't seem to be any mention of cultural contexts for ethics as part of those syllabi, and somebody else was asking, how do you deal, is this culturally dependent, and how do you deal with that?
It is culturally dependent. I will mention this briefly later on. So I'm going to share 3 different ethical philosophies that are kind of from the West. And we'll talk just briefly of one slide on, for instance, right now there are a number of indigenous data sovereignty movements. And I know the Maori data sovereignty movement has been particularly active. But different cultures do have different views on ethics. And I think that the cultural context is incredibly important. And we will not get into it tonight, but there's also kind of a growing field of algorithmic colonialism and kind of studying what are some of the issues when you have technologies built in one, particular country and culture being implemented, halfway across the world in very different cultural context, often with little to no input from people living in that culture. Although I do want to say that there are things that are widely, although not universally, agreed on. And so, for instance, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, despite the name, it is not universally accepted, but many, many different countries have accepted that as a human rights framework and as those being fundamental rights. And so there are kind of principles that are often held cross-culturally, although, it's rare for something probably to be truly, truly universal. So returning to this topic of kind of accountability and recourse, something to keep in mind is that data contains errors. So there was a database used in California that's tracking supposedly gang members, and an auditor found that there were 42 babies under the age of 1 who had been entered into this database. And something concerning about the database is that it's basically never updated. People are added, but they're not removed. And so once you're in there, you're in there. And 28 of those babies were marked as having admitted to being gang members. And so keep in mind that this is just a really obvious example of the error, but how many other kind of totally wrong entries are there? Another example of data containing errors involves the 3 credit bureaus in the United States. The FTC's large-scale study of credit reports found that 26% had at least one mistake in their files, and 5% had errors that could be devastating. This is the headline of an article that was written by a public radio reporter who went to get an apartment, and the landlord called him back afterwards and said, your background check showed up that you had firearms convictions. and this person did not have any firearms convictions. And it's something where in most cases the landlord would probably not even tell you and let you know that's why you weren't getting the apartment. And so this guy looked into it. I should note that this guy was white, which I'm sure helped him in getting the benefit of the doubt, and found this error. And he made dozens of calls and could not get it fixed until he told them that he was a reporter and that he was going to be writing about it, which is something that most of us would not be able to do. But it was even once he had pinpointed the error and he had to, talk to the, like county clerk in the place he used to live, it was still a very difficult process to get it updated. And this can have a huge, huge impact on people's lives. There's also the issue of when technology is used in ways that the creators may not have intended. So for instance, with facial recognition, it is pretty much entirely being developed for adults, yet NYPD is putting the photos of children as young as age 11 into databases, and we know the error rates are higher. This is not how it was developed. So this is a serious concern. And there are a number of kind of misuses. The Georgetown Center for Privacy and Technology, which is fantastic, you should definitely be following them, did a report, Garbage In, Garbage Out, looking at how police were using facial recognition in practice. And they found some really concerning examples. For instance, in one case, NYPD had a photo of a suspect, and it wasn't returning any matches, and they said, well, this person kind of looks like Woody Harrelson. So then they Googled the actor Woody Harrelson and put his face into the facial recognition and used that to generate leads. And this is clearly not the correct use at all, but it's a way that it's being used. And so there's kind of total lack of accountability here. And then another kind of study of cases in all 50 states of police officers kind of abusing confidential databases to look up ex-romantic partners or to look up activists. And so, here this is not necessarily an error in the data, although that can be present as well, but kind of keeping in mind how it can be misused by the users. All right, so next